This is the Real Estate Investing Abundance Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. I know you're excited to get into today's show, but I have a very exciting announcement to share with you before moving to the show. We've just launched a complimentary and comprehensive webinar that, among other things, shows you how to legally use passive real estate investing to reduce your taxes, recession-proof your nest egg, and take the sting out of inflation. If you're curious to learn more, go to stevetalker.com/webinar. It is complimentary and only takes a couple of minutes of your time. Once again, that is stevetalker.com/webinar. I'll see you in the webinar. Enjoy today's show. Hello, enlightened investors, and welcome back to Real Estate Investing Abundance. I am your host, Dr. Allen, and thank you so much for being with us again today. You are what make our show possible. Today, we are going to look at something that is really very important to all of us, but particularly to those of us who are passive investors. And we're going to take a look at how it all works together, asset protection, tax strategies, and putting that together with business structures. And we have an expert with us today, Scott Royal Smith, and he is a real estate investor and asset protection attorney. Scott is the founder and CEO of Royal Legal Solutions, a firm he built to offer tax, business, and legal strategies to clients all over the U.S. and Canada. Welcome, Scott, and take us into the show, sharing a memorable experience that helped you to be who you are today.
Hey, Alan. Yeah, so it's really great to be here. You know, one of the major things that helped me young in life was really having like a really big entrepreneurial drive. You know, I was the kid that always had the lawnmower that was cutting all the lawns around the neighborhood, saving money and not knowing what I was saving it for. But I just knew that it was good to make money, and I knew it was good to save it. I had no plan for it after that, and it wasn't until much later in life that I started to learn about investing and what that was important. But I very much thank my parents for being able to instill in me at a young age that big drive that served me so well in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very interesting that you were able to make money and save money at a young age, but didn't know what to do with it. So I don't think that's at all unusual, particularly with the fulfilled, successful professionals that I work with. They put so much time, effort, and energy into developing their careers that they've never really taken any time to look at really their financial well-being. And oftentimes, and myself included in this, I was so interested in other things that I just really never gave a whole lot of time, effort, and attention to really developing financial stability and really learning how to invest. So I'm glad you're with us today, and thank you for starting us out by sharing that experience. So where is it that we need to start when we are actually looking at asset protection?
Yeah, so it all started for me when I started to have some type of significant assets. People are always asking me, like, when's the right time? And the time I always tell them, I was like, well, would you cry if somebody took it from you? If you cry if somebody took it from you, then you should protect it, right? That happened for me is after I was in law school, I bought a transmission and auto repair shop in the building for like $10,000 in back taxes, and then flipped that to be able to pay off my law school debts and continue to invest in real estate while I was practicing as an attorney, suing insurance companies. Turns out insurance companies are great collecting premiums and even better at denying coverage, especially when things get expensive. Mm-hmm. And until I was making more money doing real estate, actually, and then I was being an attorney. And so I left practicing as an attorney and built up my portfolio. And at that time, a friend of mine lost $3 million from a single lawsuit. And I said, holy smokes, I didn't realize that could happen. And he was the guy that was kind of like a quasi mentor and just saying, hey, just have great insurance and everything will be fine. Until he had a deal that went sideways on him and, you know, breach of contract, fraud from what you told him in an email, even though he's an honest guy, right? People lie in lawsuits. That's just the nature of them. And he'd be at least $3 million today if he would have had even a single LLC in place. And that was my big wake up call. I was like, okay, I need to compartmentalize each one of these assets that I have. I need to hold them anonymously so people don't know what I own. Because when people know if people knew what I owned, then they'd know I was a good target, to come after and sue. And that's where the beginnings of asset protection really kicked off for me. Was that, hey, need to compartmentalize everything, hold it all anonymously, including my company structures. And that way, if I'm ever sued, I'll lose nothing or I'll lose little to nothing.
Mm-hmm. That's a good response, I think. How much, what would make you cry? And I think, well, a couple of dollars could make me cry. So is that really a good time to start really worrying about this? I really started, I started early, and I've had structures in place for a long, long time. I really put them in place before I started developing wealth. I mean, some of those things are really not all that costly to do. But you had also mentioned the aspect of anonymity. So I have really worked hard to keep my assets anonymous. So tell us about how you really recommend that we get started if we haven't, and what are the basic things we really need to look at to protect our assets.
So the great news is no matter what you've done before, you can always change things to get it into the right holding now, right? So it's never too late to start doing the right things, right? Especially when it comes into wealth building. What I always tell just about everybody is that, there's a right entity structure and it can depend upon what kind of assets that you have. But for most people that have like single family homes and maybe they have a brokerage account and some cash and maybe a couple other small assets, the best and easiest thing to do is to use a series LLC formed in either Delaware, Texas, Nevada, or Wyoming. Really important to form in one of those states. And then use that series LLC in any other state that you want to, just like people form Delaware, an LLC in Delaware and use it everywhere in the country. You can do the same thing with these series LLCs. And what the series LLC can do for you that's special is that you can it's one entity to maintain, one filing that you have to do, one set of accounting books, but it can create an infinite number of what are called child series. And child series are basically LLCs that you can create on your desktop for free, and you can create an infinite number of them. And so what that allows you to do then is that you can compartmentalize every single one of your assets for free. So if there's a lawsuit against property A, they can't go after property B, C, D, etc.
So you say you can create these for free, but from my understanding is that, if I have a Delaware LLC, and I have property in North Carolina, I'm going to have an LLC in North Carolina. Am I correct on that, or?
You would be correct if you don't know the tricks that I know, Alan.
Okay. So there are.
So let me show you. I'll tell you the trick.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's the trick. And the trick does two things. It creates anonymity at the same time as what it helps you do is avoid what's called a foreign entity registration. Mm-hmm. Right? So a foreign entity registration happens if I said, hey, I have a Delaware LLC and I'm going to use it in Ohio, and I'm going to own that Ohio asset directly inside of the name of the Delaware LLC. Then I actually have to go through and register the entity in Ohio, and then I got to pay all the Ohio yearly fees and do all the Ohio yearly compliance and like all that stuff. However, if what I do is form a land trust, which is a type of revocable grantor trust, what I can do is actually create anonymity in the ownership of the asset. All they see is the asset's owned by a trust, but the trust itself is owned by the child series, like child series A or child series B of the parent series LLC. So what that means is that I have anonymity in the ownership of the asset. It's compartmentalized because the trust is owned by the child series. The child series was free to create. The trust was free to create. There's no filing requirements that are needed for it. And because that parent series LLC formed in, say, Texas, for example, is only creating the child series, but the property is held in the name of a trust, well, then the LLC isn't touching Ohio. Only the trust is touching Ohio. Because only the trust is touching Ohio, then there's no foreign entity registration requirement of the LLC. And guess what? The trusts don't have their own registration requirements, these types of revocable grantor trusts. You can use them everywhere and they don't have to be registered.
So the LLC is the trustee of the trust. Is that what it is? Or
So it has with trust, when you talk about who the owners, the quote unquote owners of the trust are actually, well, they're called the beneficiaries.
the beneficiaries. Okay.
So there's the trust that's established, and it'll own the property, and it'll be called, let's say the property is at 123 Main Street. It'll be called the 123 Main Street Trust. And it'll say, and you'll look inside of the trust documents. Okay, well, who owns this trust? So, well, it's the beneficiary of the trust. Well, the beneficiary is Worldwide Investments LLC Series A. Okay, well, who owns that child series? Well, the parent owns the child series. And then you have like a tree structure that goes up. But they're all disregarded entities for tax purposes. There's no annual filings or annual maintenance you have to do. You just have to have it set up the right way.
Yeah. Well, interesting. You're the first attorney I have talked to who has even mentioned this particular process. So how did you come by that, and how did you find out about that?
Well, we've been using series LLCs now for about 12 years, for about 2,000 clients all over the country. They've been around for about 25 years now, 26 years, okay. To say, maybe even a little longer in some states. And yeah, the issue is that you don't see a lot of people using series LLCs because there's just not that many times in life where what you need to be able to do is create an infinite number of LLCs for free. Right? Most people don't run into that scenario. Single family home investors are typically the people that are running into that issue where they're like, oh, I'm not making a ton of money on a per asset basis to be able to afford the filing and upkeep and maintenance of a bunch of individual LLCs because the margins aren't that huge. So I need a way to be able to solve that problem and the compartmentalization problem. And that's where series LLCs became to be this. Remember, I was a single family home investor. So these are the things I had to figure out for myself first. And that's kind of the way everything in Royal Legal Solutions like developed, everything from our asset protection divisions to our tax, to our estate planning, to the investments, all the investment work that we do is all essentially things that I built because this is what I needed to live the kind of life that I wanted to live with the kind of business and kind of investing.
Well, you say it's for single family home investors, but I could see how it could be very beneficial for multifamily real estate investors or self-storage or mobile home parks. I mean, because most of us are into several different deals all at one time. So would this work for us, or is it really just set up for single family homes?
Yeah, so you can use it for anything. Even we have like no investors and syndication investors that decide they want extra precaution, right? And they want to compartmentalize each of the assets. One of the tricky things that comes into play always, right? And this is where at the very beginning of our conversation, I was like, well, the right entity structure for the individual actually depends upon the portfolio and the assets and their plan for what is they're going to grow into the future, is that you also need to consider as part of this as how is financing going to happen? And do I need to take into account what the financing institutions are going to be comfortable with? Because they might actually determine, okay, we need it held an XYZ type of entity. And then we'll say, great. So now we're inside of a box of their rules. Now we need to say, what's the most efficient from a cost and time perspective system that we can build in the box of the rules that the financing institution has set so that they feel comfortable with in lending. And this is why it matters who you use for taxes and legal work, because my opinion is that the professionals that I want to hire ideally have already built for themselves or ran the businesses that I'm looking to build. Because then they don't just have theoretical knowledge, they know the practical application of what's going to happen. And the closer I can get to that, the more success that I have working with professionals, right? Like of all sorts. Like if I'm a dentist, I want to be coached by not somebody who's a generalized business coach. I want to be coached by somebody who's like built and sold dental practices, because they're going to tell me much more in depth than just somebody who's like a generalist out there. And the same thing applies in investing, and depending upon what type of assets you're investing in, what's the comfortability of people have with all of those, and everything goes into that. So I just offer that as like a little aside, as just some type of framework that I think is typically helpful for people when trying to figure out, well, who do I need on my team?
Mm-hmm.
What does it need to look like? What's the value of this kind of advice or kind of insight? Something I should really listen to, or is it, it might be on point for me, it might not.
Well, that's always good advice. The more specialized our mentors and coaches are, the more beneficial they are certainly going to be. Well, let's move in here to tax savings strategies and how can we use them? What are the tax strategies that you suggest and offer?
So the first thing that you need to actually think about tax strategies is actually how are you going to be doing your investing? Because there's some tax and this is a thing I never hear about. Nobody ever talks about this at all. Is that some tax strategies that you use will impact your ability to get financing, and some of them won't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you actually need to know what is going to be the investment strategy that we're going after with the money that is we're making, to know what it is and you actually need to do on the tax front. We can actually likely get to the same exact tax result that we're looking for, but the route to get there can be very different. And one of them will impact your ability to get financing for your investments, and one of them won't. So that's where it goes beyond just, can you file taxes? Do you know tax strategy? Do you actually know investing strategy that relates to the other two, right? And that's what I ended up having to build for myself inside of my own tax division. Mm-hmm. So after you know what your investment criteria or acquisition strategy is going to be for how you're going to turn this top line revenue into assets, and what's the most efficient and effective way for you to do that, then there's a few things you want to look at. You want to start looking at, number one, what are all the different types of deductions that I can be taking, right? And how can I get as many deductions inside of my business as I legally can? And can I get those deductions in the right way? That's either going to be that I'm either thinking about my ability to get financing or not. Question number two comes in as, what are the types of tax shelters that I need in that time? Do I want to be using solo 401ks, IRAs, SEP IRAs, and these types of retirement accounts because I'm really just looking at a long-term net worth play for this money? Or do I want a different type of tax shelter because what I'm really trying to get to is what the durable financial freedom look like for me in the short run? And then your tax shelter there needs to be different. Likely, you would want to be using something like a private foundation that can protect up to 30% of your income, and protecting income in your private foundation and investing in their private foundation in the same way that you would like an IRA, but you can pull money out of the foundation without penalty, which you can't do from an IRA. And then lastly, your final consideration is, what are the types of assets you're investing in? Because the assets that you're investing in can have huge tax benefits. Like some of the larger syndication deals that we're working with, like self-storage units, for example, will have huge amounts of depreciation. Like they're structured to be tax incentive based types of investments. Then you'll also, you can be looking at things like, well, great, do I need to offset W-2 income? Okay, great. Well, then you might want to be looking at, can me or a spouse qualify as a real estate professional? If not, then should I be looking at oil and gas or green energy types of investments? Because different types of depreciation can offset different types of income, and those are two different types of asset classes. But at the end of the day, the game is actually always the same. It's what are my deductions? What are my tax shelters? What are my investments? And then that takes me up to the very top, which is, okay, what's my investment strategy actually going to be? So I hope that's not too long-winded of an answer, but that's how the whole system works together.
Enlightened investors, if you haven't done so already, be sure and click that like button and also click that share so others can take advantage of the content. And finally, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single one of our upcoming episodes. Well, there's a lot to unpack here, and we only have so much time here. But yes, we could go into detail on each one of those 4 different points here. But just give us an overview here on what it is that you're talking about in terms of private foundations and what those are, and then why those are good for tax shelters in some situations anyway.
Yeah, what we find is that there's usually 2 almost always big wins. One is getting the right type of investment for opportunity for a client, which is typically in some sort of syndication with an operator who I've known and worked with for a number of years and I trust. Can't guarantee any particular investment, right? But this is the best I know what to do with my own money. And then, for clients, we allow them to kind of coast in on my coattails of hard work on that. Then there's the private foundation. So the private foundation is your own 501c3 entity, needs to be established with some charitable purpose, not required that it actually do anything in furtherance of that charitable purpose, otherwise just being established for it. And what it works like is almost like a super IRA. So if, let's say I have $100,000 in income, I can take $30,000 of that income and move it into my private foundation. Now that $30,000 in income is not taxed, right? Because it's a donation to a charitable institution. So now I have $30,000 in my private foundation. Now my private foundation can do it, can invest that money year over year in any types of investments that it wants to grow the wealth of the foundation, ostensibly for whatever the charitable purpose is. So each year that private foundation is going to be making gains from its investments. None of those gains are taxed because it's held inside of the private foundation, but 5% of the money of the foundation has to get donated to other charities. So if you have a part of charitable giving in your life already, then you get to donate the money from your private foundation to those other charities, and that's how you are able to do your charitable giving component of your life. But the big win is I didn't get taxed on the money on the front end when I got put into the foundation, and I don't get taxed on any gains of the foundation. The only time that there's any taxable event that happens is when you decide as a director of the foundation that you're going to pull a salary. So that typically is happening in conjunction when you're like, I'm flipping the switch now to go from working to my financial freedom. I'm going to flip that switch. And when you flip that switch, then you're going to say, great, now I'm taking all these investments, and instead of like building the nest egg, I'm going to start drawing off of it because this is actually how I'm living in my financial freedom lifestyle.
Well, thank you for explaining that in very understandable and simple terms there, because, one of my goals is to establish a foundation. And from the way you're telling me this, I should probably have done that long ago and instead of waiting. And so, thank you for explaining that. So, Scott, tell us about your company, how it works, and how it is that we can get in touch with you to take advantage of what you offer.
Yeah, so the company is called Royal Legal Solutions. My name is Scott Royal Smith. That's where the company came from. So you can blame my mother for that. And so it originally just got built out of the need that I had for myself, and then just like a few friends that wanted to look at, sure, we've made money, right? But actually, how do we now get invested? And more importantly, how do we get time back, right? Mm-hmm. And what is this game that we can play around durable financial freedom? What does that take? Where we can have money, we can have time, and we can have security of knowing here's what the future is going to look like. So we can go do this other thing called living, because this other thing called living is actually what it's all supposed to be about, right? It's not about how much gas you can get in the car. It's supposed to be about the road trip. But we get so focused on the gas that we forget about the road trip. And this is my best take at here's what's actually necessary to do it, is that I built a firm with the professionals that have the attorneys, the CPAs, the MBAs, the CFOs, the investment advisory, people. So that way anybody now can have an opportunity to be able to, with inside of the first 6-week time period, to be able to get everything they need built for all of their asset protection, all of their estate planning, all of like the tax strategy, the portfolio strategy. So that way we can do the work over the course of the year of coaching them in to here's actually how you run everything in this wealth building company that we've essentially built for you and managed for you and maintained for you that you're now the CEO of. Let's go ahead and train you how to do that over the course of the year as part of monthly meetings, and dial in about how to get your capital remotivated in the right way, balanced for risk, that says, how quickly can we get to durable financial freedom with all of the best thinking that we have about what that means and how to get there. And so we get to play the really fun game of saving people On average, it's at least $10,000 to $15,000 a year on tax. We have some clients, of course, that have saved six figures on tax because they're using things like private foundation, and I think some people save more when they start moving money into syndications. I mean, it's really wild, and the timelines to freedom go from regularly double digits to mid to low single digits. So it's, to me, it's the most beautiful thing in the world to be able to say, great, you can be free in now in some cases, to sometimes it's like 2 years when they were like, oh, I think it's going to be 15 to 20. And I don't really know how to get there.
Well, it sounds like a terrific service. So I'm so glad that you were with us today to share that with us. Let's go into our final 4 questions here and share with us 3 good things from the last 24 hours.
Oh, man. Yeah. So I got to see a great friend last night. Got to meet his new baby girl. We got to enjoy some dinner together. I got a great drive out this morning, being able to see some of the morning up here in northern Washington and just absorb some of the nature on that drive. And it's fantastic.
And how are you putting your success as an investor and entrepreneur to work to create universal well-being?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on this really directly right now. I'm taking the Elementum coaching program, which is a 7-month training on how to do personal coaching for people. So I think that this is the next level for me and for how I'm in service to the world, is saying, I really feel like I figured out how all of the money sides of life are going to work, and that the only thing that's left is, well, how good are we at being able to shift our state of being that we can enjoy the opulence that we've actually created.
Wonderful. Well, share with us one of your most difficult setbacks in life, and how did you come through that, and what was your lesson from that?
Probably the most difficult thing that I've ever run into in life is I lost my father when I was 3 years old. And it was years. I remember up in like junior high, just like the thought or trying to talk about it would just bring me to tears. And it was just, but over the course of time, like the pain got less and less. And then eventually I was able to, not even through like any professional help or anything, but I was able to come to like a sense of like peace with the fact of like, yeah, that was really painful. And now I'm actually okay with it. And that experience to me taught me that it's like everything is always going to be okay. As that there's not really a way in which it's not going to be okay. I might be in the process of getting to a place of being able to let go of what it is, but eventually it's going to be okay. And all I just need to do is to relax into what's going on now and trust that eventually it's going to move and be okay.
Well, Scott, our last question. Imagine you have come to the end of your life and you lay on your deathbed. What do you look back on with your greatest sense of joy and fulfillment?
I think it was, the thing that I really hoped for is that I brought some other people along the journey with me. I work really hard about the question of like, what is the best possible life that I can live? And what does that mean? And really committed to that. And I all the companies and all the leadership stuff that I do and the coaching I do is really just so that I can have other people to enjoy the ride with me about like how amazing all of this stuff really is, this thing called living. And so I hope in my deathbed that I get to reflect on that and all of the people that I was able to get on the bus and go on the road trip with.
Yeah, it is so easy for us, I think, to take for granted life itself, and it's our most precious gift. And I think we forget that oftentimes. So thank you for reminding us of that. And thank you, enlightened investors, for being with us again today. What a wonderful show we've had here. Scott, you've just been a wonderful guest and brought lots of joy and hope and happiness today. So thank you for being with us. Enlightened investors, you know the drill. Like, share, and subscribe, and leave us a comment. We love to hear from you. Till next time, be well and prosper. Enlightened investors, wait, don't go just yet. I just want to remind you about our recently launched webinar that you will not want to miss. If you're at all curious and would like to learn more about how real estate investing can diversify your investment portfolio, alleviate the anxiety associated with Wall Street swings, leverage your 401ks and IRAs to substantially increase the return on your investment, and do all of this with turnkey, hands-off, passive real estate investments, then you'll want to immediately go to stevetalker.com/webinar. In the webinar, we'll also address the common dubious investment schemes that you want to avoid. To access the webinar, go to stevetalker.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you in the webinar.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steve Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at stevetalker.com.